the slide, although the first sentence, because it talks about the possible implementation and so on, my main concern, Mr. Semenya, I gather, wants to say something in a moment, but my main concern is this first sentence in the second bullet. That appears to have been taken over from these minutes.
Chair.
Mr. Semenya?
For the record, G5 is a statement of General Mbombo deposed on the 19th of November. It does not use that expression of whole morning. So however that was compiled, it clearly was not on the strength of a statement she made.
Exhibit L was, I take it, more or less finished before the 19th of November.
Yes,
it was presented to the Commission before then.
Yes, it was. On the 5th of November it was being presented.
Yeah, and it seems now clear that this, not entirely accurate, shall we say, first sentence of the second bullet is based upon the minute. I think that's fair, but presumably Colonel Visser will tell us that when he comes.
Yes, but that's in my own...
Thank you, Chairperson.
Interrupted you, Mr. Mpofu. I hope you...
No, that's very helpful.
Destroy the thrust of your cross-examination.
No, Chairperson, this time it didn't steal my thunder. Yes. Thank you, Chair.
Chair, I was just saying that when I was actually drafting my statement, because I had trouble recollecting some of what was put into the special JOCCOM's minutes, I also saw that the slides and the minutes were speaking to each other. So, as I say, from what I can deduct from that is that Colonel Visser was placing in, obviously, what had been given to him from the minutes.
Is it possible for us to ascertain whether the version of Exhibit L, the first tranche of Exhibit L, which was presented at the end of routes at a meeting attended by the Provincial Commissioner, included the slide?
I can have a quick look, Chairperson.
Thanks. Thank you, Chairperson.
Chairperson, if I can possibly assist, that wording is in there in J 118, which is a draft of the chapter on the 16th, which was saved on the 1st of September.
It does seem from that as if that slide that we now have before us was part of the presentation made of the first tranche, as I call it, of Exhibit L at the end of routes, which was attended, as far as you can recall, by both the national and the provincial commissioners.
I see that. I'm just going to also verify in the final one, which was shown at routes, similarly, whether it was there as well.
It was there. Are you checking if you found the answer yet?
Yeah, I think the one Advocate Jackson...
Mr. Jackson spoke about what was the position on the 1st of September.
Yeah.
What I'm interested in, and I use that then to infer, possibly incorrectly, that what was part of the presentation at the end of routes, which was presented to a gathering attended by the national and provincial commissioners, included that slide. But perhaps you can help us on that specifically.
I wonder if it's possible to put on the screen complete Marikana 2012-0803, although it's saved on the 5th of September at 10:42 p.m. I'm not sure if it has an exhibit number.
This is a question, if it's addressed to me, I have to confess incompetence to answer, but Mr. Shaskerson hopefully can help us.
It does have an exhibit number, J 155. And that will actually show what was presented at the end of routes.
Well, let's see if we can get that.
Yes. And just for completion, the last bullet also that says, after evaluating the situation and from reports on the ground, the Provincial Commissioner instructed Major General Anandil to proceed with the implementation and so on. Also, particularly if you read it with Exhibit EE, would also seem to be seeking to give us the impression that that instruction was based on that so-called evaluation and reports from the ground, correct?
I do believe that part took place. I'm not disputing that a decision may have been taken prior to this, that this situation needed to come to an end that day. Again, what I've been saying earlier in the Commission as well is that there's a decision obviously taken that it must end this day, and then there's a decision on the time which needs to be taken. When do we do this? So whether they're talking here about that point of is it now the applicable time? Have we exhausted Mr. Matunja's dialogue for that matter, etc. So.
Problem with that, because Matunja hadn't reported back yet. I mean, even as far as I can make out, before, when the 1:30 meeting, the 13:30, sorry, I must use police language, when the 13:30 meeting began, he hadn't even come back from the first meeting. So that's a problem. But of course, he then later, as we know, went the second time, and I don't know that his lack of success on the second occasion was reported to anybody before the actual uncoiling of the wire began. But anyway, that's another problem. But it does seem as if the third bullet would require some rephrasing to bring it in line with total accuracy. Would you agree with that? My recollection, maybe I'm wrong, but my recollection is that Mr. Matunja came back after 13:30, but because I think there's even a video clip of his motor car leaving the scene and coming back to the dock. I think that's after 13:30. But anyway, that's something we can verify easily later. All I'm asking you, not for me to ask, would you say, this really follows from Mr. Mpofu's question, that the third bullet requires some rephrasing to bring it in line with absolute accuracy?
Chair. Chair, may we place on record, at an appropriate stage we'll make the argument whether it was or it was not a problem for the uncoiling of the wire at the time of Matunja's departure. We know for a fact he was not going to make a report. He was on the freeway when scene one happened. He was leaving. So whether or not he was going to give a report and whether it constitutes a problem, we reserve the right to argue those points at the end.
I understand that. That's a point well made, I think.
Yes.
If I may say so. Let's get an answer to the witness to the question that we've been asking him, and then you can proceed. Remember the question. The question was whether the third bullet requires some reformulation to bring it in line with absolute accuracy.
It's actually requiring of me, Chairperson, to remember specifically what was said there. But
if you can't remember, you can't answer the question, then you can say so. No one wants to force you to say anything which you can't truthfully say.
Because...
But Chair, again, the proposition being placed by Mr. Mpofu on it is incorrect. It is the instruction that is given to go to stage 3, not the decision to go to stage 3.
What do you say about that point Mr. Semenya raises?
I will say nothing, Chairperson. The witness has already confirmed that the impression that is sought to be conveyed by this slide is that these things were causally connected, and they were not.
It seems as if the question then falls away. It doesn't have to be persisted in. Mr. Matunja, sorry, Mr.
Thank you.
I'm making the same mistake as you.
At least you didn't call me Bishop Mpofu, Chairperson.
That would be stretching things up.
Thanks. Thank you, Chairperson. Now, Colonel, Just there's something I want to understand. Your evidence is that when that you were shocked, maybe I'm overstating the thing, but you were surprised that this whole meeting, this one on EE now at 13:30, was effectively coming to its conclusion, and nobody was saying, what's the plan? And you then either raised your hand or made it clear that that stage needed to be looked at. Is that a fair summary?
Well, that is what I can specifically recall, was sitting, and why I say I was probably, my mind was preoccupied, knowing that we were going to phase 3, that I was brainstorming and just putting everything in order. But I do recollect that it was asked to the JOCOM, how do we go about doing this? And I don't say what strategy. The strategy was already accepted as it's going to be a dispersal action. And of course, as I've mentioned before, being a junior officer, it's not my place just to jump in. So I waited a short while and then asked if I can make a recommendation.
Yes. No, I accept that's how it happened sequentially. All I'm saying is that at some stage you were concerned. I don't want to put it more than that. You were concerned that this whole discussion was basically coming to an end and nobody had raised issues about what actual plan was going to be implemented.
I wouldn't say concerned, and it wasn't coming to an end. It was by no means. I think we were still in the infancy of the actual JOCOM at that stage. So it was just a point of respect, allowing others to first have the opportunity to give input, and then thereafter giving my input. So that is what I actually waited for and then did. So it wasn't exactly a point of me sort of thinking, well, I'm concerned now. I need to say something. I knew quite well in my mind what I thought should happen. And that's what I eventually got to convey to the JOCOM.
Okay, and in any event, you did give the rudimentary, or rather, you did give a briefing to the meeting about the proposed plan, now that the decision was taken, correct?
Yes.
And when you gave that decision, and I won't blame you if you don't remember this, but can you remember whether when you gave that decision, you, what's his name, Major General Annandale, had already said that the operation is going to start at 15:30?
Which decision?
No.
Which decision is Mr. Mpofri?
He wants you to reformulate your question. He feels it's not
Okay,
clear.
fine.
Anyway, let's give him a chance to raise his problem directly, and then you can answer it.
Yes, thank you.
These questions and answers may well be very important, so
Yes.
let's get it right.
It may be, yes. Just go to double E again.
Mr. Semenya wants to make a point.
No, I was conceding. I'm conceding.
I'm not quite
That's
sure
fine.
precisely how he wants to make his point. Let's give him a chance.
No, I was going to say it is unclear what decision is Mr. Mpofri referring to.
Yes, thank you. I plead guilty. Now, can you go to double E at the end? It's numbered page 1613. The last sentence says meeting agenda at 1400. The one just before that, where it says Major General Annandale instructed Brigadier Pretorius and Lieutenant Colonel Scott to report back at 15:15 as he wants the operation to commence at 15:30. Remember that?
I remember that being said. The times were given that I needed to 2:30.
Yes, all I'm saying is that
yes.
From the minute, that seems to have happened at the end.
Yes.
Okay, so when you were giving your briefing at that stage, you were not aware that you would only have less than an hour to do the briefings of the commanders, and they must do the briefings of the troops, so to speak.
When I gave my briefing, I don't believe that 15:30 had been set yet.
Yes. Thank you.
Can I ask you this, Colonel? You told us that you took your laptop with you into the field, as it were, and you there showed the commanders what was on your laptop. Now, what you showed them, was it already on your laptop at 1400 at the time when the meeting adjourned, or did you actually have to sit down and do some work with your computer to get everything that you wanted to show the commanders into a form that you could show them?
I had to first rearrange the icons, Chairperson, on the Google Earth map itself on the computer, just to better reflect the photograph that I'd seen earlier from how the police had now deployed with Nyala 6 moving back. I think it is shown as one of the exhibits in the KMZ files. But I had to first do that, and that's why I say I remember that when the meeting sort of got to that stage, when I'd finished briefing and it was said, okay, you need to brief them, you need to go to them at Forward Holding Area 1 and so on, then I started working on fixing up my presentation, or that Google Earth picture, and General Annandale started on a whiteboard, a flip chart, where he started making a list of sorts that I wasn't paying attention to that though. But I know him with 1 or 2 or 3 people stood around a flip chart just to go over a checklist, to draft up a checklist. But as soon as I was complete, myself and Brigadier Pretorius jumped in the vehicle and went so we could get there.
You told us previously that you started the presentation, I think, at 2:30, is that right?
Yes.
14:30. And it would have taken you 20 minutes to have had that printed. And there wasn't time. So for which tells me, I take it, that it must have been in final form, or the form to be shown to the commanders in the field, sometime after 14:10.
Yes, yes.
I mean, clearly, I take it, it would have been desirable to have given them a printout if you'd had time to do so. I understand you were in a bit of a jam there. You had to, you had a time at which you had to give the briefing.
Yes.
And if you had to save time on something, the printouts was where you were going to save time. Is that right?
It was amongst others, Chairperson, because it's not just about printing that map off Google, it's about saving the photo, opening a new document in a PowerPoint presentation, pasting it in there, putting it to size, and all this starts taking a bit of time, saving that onto a memory stick, running over to Lonman's offices to get to the secretary there again, and so it was quite a time process. And
you told us that process would have taken 20 minutes.
Yeah.
So is that still right, or you, in reflection,
yes,
do you think that's wrong?
That's about correct, yes.
Thanks.
Thank you. Now, Colonel, I'm sure you are aware that... okay, now let me not bother you with that. Did it ever occur to you that an operation that involved a tactical phase would not be advisable for the reason that the members might have been motivated by revenge in respect of what had happened on the 13th?
That wasn't an issue for me. I think that the police members are really professional enough to know that you don't allow issues that you have, or whether you're seeking vengeance, to come in the way of the law. They're still working as teams. If hypothetically, if there was somebody that was thinking that way, it would have been very difficult for him to have done something like that, considering that they were in teams. And it was, I think, I stand under correction, but I think more than half or more of the police officers deployed were not there on the Monday. So I don't think that never crossed my mind as being a possibility.
So, okay, so that never crossed your mind, so it was never a consideration on your part at any stage?
No.
Then what did you mean when you said at page 13358 of the record, in your evidence in chief, against line 15, Mr. Semenya says to you, it was your perception that emotions were high on all sides, was it not? Colonel Scott, yes. And that a tactical option at that time was ill-advised. Colonel Scott, yes.
Okay, but again, if you continue, the reason that I'm going through that reasoning process is that if we get into conflict with the miners that next day, the Tuesday, I said that the public and the media may perceive it as being a retaliation. So that is the issue that is about. I was aware that emotions were high. I'd seen Colonel Marafe, who was really emotional. I'd obviously not dealt with his members, but I'd heard the story of the threats made to General Mpembe. But these are not, again, made towards strikers in any way. And I didn't foresee at that stage. My aim of what I'm saying there is not based on the fact that those police officers were not fit for duty the next day. It was based on the fact that should a conflict happen the next day, that it would be interpreted as the fact that it was retaliation. And I'm in no way saying that the emotions weren't high. I'd seen Colonel Marafe
consideration and to say no. And I'm saying then, can you then explain to the Commission why you thought that a tactical option was ill-advised at a particular stage because emotions were high on all sides? If it was never crossed your mind, all the things you said, and it never was a consideration that there might be a motive of vengeance.
But that's the very point you're making. I'm saying that I don't believe the police officers at any time would have taken up a motive of vengeance.
Before you carry on with the answer, Mr. Semenya wants to say something.
Chair, the question of at no stage going tactical was asked in the context of the 16th.
No, it was not.
And my learned colleague now refers...
Mr. Semenya, John.
And my learned colleague refers now to the evidence of the witness in relation to why the Monday when he arrived there and the plans he sought to make was that it might be ill-advised to go tactical because it would be seen to be retaliation for the events of yesterday. But that's not where the question started.
The matter is now being cleared up by Mr. Semenya, and I take it the witness now understands the point which you are endeavouring to make. Perhaps he can give us his answer.
Well, no, Chairperson, I'm sorry. Before it is answered, I think the matter has not been cleared up by Mr. Semenya. It's been unnecessarily confused and narrowed up.
What he says is the passage that you quoted was a passage from his evidence dealing with his thinking on the morning, I think it is, either the evening of the 13th or the morning of the 14th. The question you ask is of a broader ambit. It covers it's covered by the phrase "at any stage" and includes the situation up to the 16th. So the witness now knows that's what you want the answer to. He knows the passage you're relying on relates to either the evening of the 13th or morning of the 14th, but of course it's possible that thinking would have continued to prevail through the whole period. But let's get his answer to it.
Yeah, okay, Chairperson.
Well, that was my perception that I had, was that if there was a conflict on the Tuesday, that it would have been viewed as a retaliatory measure from the police for having members killed. I'm not saying that the police members would in any way have done that. I'm saying I feel that they are too professional to think that way. And I said it before, if there was an individual or more than one individual that may have felt that way, it would have been difficult for him to have done anything in that light because he was in team context with other people. So what my perception I was concerned with then was what South Africa would have thought and the international community would have thought. If the police had gone tactical on the Tuesday morning and there was conflict, let's say a conflict similar to what happened on the Thursday, they would immediately have placed blame on the fact that the police were in retaliation for what happened because of the Monday incident. And I felt that was an ill-advised way to go forward. Thus, bring in dialogue and negotiations. If there are high emotions, which I did perceive with some of the officers, they can subside for that matter. And that very officer I was speaking about wasn't even there on the Thursday, for that matter. That's the person I was referring to as seeing as emotional, and I think rightly so after what he'd experienced.
Yeah, well, Colonel, I'm going to, in fairness to you, I'm going to argue that your answers in this respect are not completely truthful. But maybe let me do this.
I don't know how fair that argument is going to be.
Well,
I don't think you mean it.
You'll know. And
in fairness to him, you're telling him
when
that's going to be an argument.
Yes.
Whether the argument will be a fair argument is something for us to decide.
Well, it will be, because you said it never crossed your mind. Does the word never to you cover the 14th or the 15th or the 16th?
Mr. Paul, for you asking about vengeance, there's a difference between somebody that's hurting with emotions and vengeance. And it never crossed my mind that there would be vengeance. It crossed my mind that there was emotions, and that the international community, if the police even acted rightfully on the Tuesday and there were deaths, would view that as vengeance.
Yes, but that's not the point. The point is that all that crossed your mind as Colonel Scott at some stage of your life. So to say that it never crossed your mind is not correct. Is that?
I think I've explained it pretty clearly.
Never. Did you mean never at all? Or did you mean never on during a particular time frame?
Chairperson, and I don't think I'm naive in saying this, I did not foresee that the police had a motive of vengeance, whether it be on the Tuesday or Wednesday or Thursday. The organisation is too big and is too professional, and there's too many people, as I'm saying, there. I didn't even consider that individuals, for that matter, would be thinking that way. My concern was just on that fact, that I knew that emotions were high, and I think anybody can make that deduction after witnessing what happened on the Monday, and that any action that would happen on the Tuesday, if there was any form of violence or police action, was going to be perceived as vengeance. And there's a difference being perceived as vengeance and truly being the vengeance. I just wanted to prohibit that perception being made, thus also proposing, amongst others, the dialogue, the negotiations.
Did you know that some of the briefings that were given to the members on the ground suggested that these protesters were very dangerous and they had already claimed 8 innocent lives?
I can't speak to that. I haven't read that in statements either. Although I haven't read the member statements that were on the ground, so...
No, that's fine. That was Captain Kidd.
I don't remember that evidence, but I could be wrong.
Well, it's the second time.
Mr. Menya, he doesn't object, so I presume it's correct.
It's there. Well, it's all over the IPID statements. Captain Kidd, in particular, Kidd, was responsible for that, but that's for another day.
Moving on to something else. I'd like to ask a question about the
this
passage of the minutes that's on the screen, but if you want to ask about it, then I'll stand back for you.
No, Chairperson, let me just round off this point before the Chairperson asks that question. So when you said a tactical option would be ill-advised because emotions were high on both sides, you were not referencing that to the incident of the 13th, were you?
It was in reference to the incident of the 13th.
Okay. Thank you, Chairperson. You can ask your question.
The passage we have here on the screen, the paragraph beginning, the Provincial Commissioner indicated. As far as you're aware, was the Provincial Commissioner in the JOCCOM meeting the whole time from when it began at 13:30 to 1400 when it adjourned?
I would have recalled her leaving, Chairperson, so she was there, and up until the time I started working on my computer, no one had left up until that time. But as I say, then it became a little bit informal. Groups started forming, people started wandering around doing their thing. It's possible she left after that.
But then did she come back? If it's possible she left, I mean, did you see her coming back at any stage?
The only time I really recall her in person again was when I saw her pacing up and down inside the JOC, which was later that afternoon. How long she'd been there, I don't know.
The reason I asked the question is obviously a matter for us to ask her, but it does look from this paragraph as if she'd already told the National Commissioner before the 1330 meeting began that phase 3 of the operation plan would be executed, and that there was a deadlock in negotiations and so forth. But anyway, that's a matter you can't throw any light on.
And that's why I'm saying I think at times there's maybe two decisions that needed to be made. One was phase 3 will happen. It's just about when will phase 3 happen, or is this the appropriate time? But again, I don't want to go there. That wasn't my area or where I could actually give input.
Colonel, do you perhaps know when it was that General Mbombo was appraised of the details of phase 3 for the first time?
Ma'am, it was, unless the generals had informed her earlier, which I was not there, it was at the 1330 JOCOM.
And prior to that, the only other person who was aware of the details was Major General Annandale.
No, not even of the details.
Not of the details.
He would have known of the strategy, as I'm sure would have General Mpembe. And but in saying this, in police circles, if you talk, if we spoke about encirclement, we're going to encircle the protesters at the Kopi. Immediately, that picture speaks volumes. You know what you're going to do. There's going to be a razor wire thrown right around them to encircle them fully with a gap left. And if you speak to the fact that we're going to disperse them, that again speaks volumes. There could be additions to that just to say, but we will put out the razor wire as a barrier between us and them as a protective measure, etc. So when we're saying these things, although it can be mentioned in a sentence or two, a police official will understand to some degree a whole lot more than what's just being mentioned in those two sentences. That's why I say, even so, there are standard operating procedures on how to disperse and how to do these things. And this is what's relied upon even on the ground. When we talked about the discretion of operational commanders to make decisions based on what they're observing their opponents doing, they rely on training and on standard operating procedures to be brought to the front, because it is not possible for them to call briefings in the heat of the moment. So they would simply give through already approved, trained, accepted procedures on what's about to happen now. They would just give the detail of the direction and other specific small things that they maybe want included. I see a group to the left and a group to the right, or whatever it's going to be. So much of the time, and that's how the police would work. In fact, many times even in the military, if they're in a conventional warfare type of situation, you'd find the same thing. Once they're going into an action situation and the opponent dictates something else, there are certain strategies that are in place already from exercises or training that they would execute without having to call meetings and briefings, and it's a matter of standard operating procedures then which take over based upon that commander's call on what to do on ground. So the chance that General Annandale or Brigadier or General Mpembe had already informed the provincial commissioner that morning, because I know they were called out of the JOCOM just after 8 o'clock, 20 past 8 maybe, and the media briefing I think is only at about 9:30.
9:30.
So there was a time period that they probably got to spend with her and maybe even briefed her. Speculation now, but something had to have been said. But I'm quite sure that knowing the chain of command, they would have brought her up to speed with where the police are at now and what's going on.
The informal discussion that you had with Major General Annandale on the Wednesday, do you know whether that was conveyed up the line, the content of that,
as regards
phase 3?
I don't know that, Chairperson. No. Commissioner, no.
Sir, thank you. Colonel, once again, if you don't remember the answer, I won't hold it against you. But it looks like the duration of that meeting was about half an hour, correct?
The JOCOM.
Yes. The 1330 meeting.
It's probably a half an hour to 40 minutes, yes.
Yes. Now, if you can remember, of that 30 minutes or 40 minutes, your presentation of the plan, what duration did it take of that period?
Well, for me, it felt long. Obviously, I can't say we weren't keeping time or clocks, but because that was my majority input, so I was concentrating on it, I think, before I actually got to present it, while I presented it, and then afterwards. So as I say, to me, that took up the bulk of that time. I'm aware that other things were said. I just don't quite recall listening in depth to what was being said, knowing where we were going and knowing that I needed to more than likely present something to the JOCOM on our way forward.
So would it be fair, maybe a third of the meeting was taken over by your presentation?
I would absolutely speculate.
The meeting is 10 minutes, isn't it?
That's correct.
Did you take 10 minutes or longer or less?
I think the actual briefing part would have been between 10 and 15 minutes that I actually did.
Thanks. Okay. Fine. So effectively then what we have for this major operation is you giving a presentation to this meeting of about 10-15 minutes, and then later giving a presentation to the commanders of around the same period, and they giving a presentation to their people of roughly the same period.
I know that the one I gave to them was a bit longer. I can recall going on the way there, understanding that how I would go through my briefing process on a certain acronym that I use. So I would have been going more into depth with them as well. And I know I did go in more in depth with them than I did actually at the JOCOM, for that matter. So it was probably more to the half an hour, because if I see I arrived at exactly at 2:30 on the dot, all on my watch anyway, and I got back to the JOC according to my vehicle at about 3:10, and it's probably not even a 10-minute drive. It's 3-4 kilometers of driving. So that period I would have been spent briefing those members there.
Yes, and if that's correct, then there would only have been a half an hour for them to walk or drive back to their stations, brief their people, and for those people to take their positions, correct?
Yes.
Now, you'd agree that those kinds of tight timelines are not consistent with what we have been told was meticulous planning for this operation, correct?
Well, you're talking again about the stage 3, and I think the police's opening statement is talking wider than stage 3. It's talking right from phase 1 to phase 6. So, and yes, timelines were tight regarding the revised stage 3.
Right. Now, you remember that there's also evidence, I think it's part of what we nicely call the previously undisclosed evidence. But do you know that there was evidence about Brigadier Khalid's addressing the members and informing them that they had done nothing wrong?
I remember seeing that video, yes, here in the Commission.
Are you also aware of the report, I think it's FFF 27, is it? Yeah. FFF 27, that ascribed to the National Commissioner similar words about not doing something wrong, but mainly that we are not sorry about what happened.
Yes? I've heard of that being spoken of. I'm just not sure the words are totally accurate, or whether it's quoted out of a media open source media. I'm not sure.
No, don't worry about whether that's accurate or not. Were you aware that such words were ascribed? That's why I used the words ascribed.
I'd heard of the criticism towards the National Commissioner, but as I say, I never heard her saying them, and I'm quite aware that at times people can be misquoted. I'm not saying she was, I just know that that's a very big possibility. I've been misquoted in the Commission already.
Chair,
Mr. Menyu's got his light on, Mr. Menyu.
As I recall, it is the editorial caption given to the article that follows. It's not her words.
Well, you recall incorrectly. Can you go to FFF 27 then? It's an article, it's not an editorial. Quote, "We are not sorry," unquote. Can you see it?
As far as I can recall, well, I have now got the document in front of me. It's a headline, and the issue, sub-editors sometimes summarize inaccurately. The question is whether the headline accurately summarizes the report. That's the first question. And the second question, of course, is whether the report's accurate. Now, I see that the reporter has put in quotation marks the following words: "Safety of the public is not negotiable," unquote, said Fiega. Don't be sorry about what happened. The quotation marks aren't renewed, but I imagine it looks as if it was necessary. Take into account the reasons why we did what we did. And my recollection is that when she gave evidence, she denied that she used those words. And no one has produced any recording to indicate that those were her exact words. The caption on the photograph, it says a photograph of the National Commissioner addressing the mourners at the funeral service of Warrant Officer Lepaku, and the opening words are "no remorse, colon." But she denies that she used that language, and therefore the question as put, I think it goes too far.
No,
it may well be that you can rephrase the question in the way that meets the objection.
The reason I use the word ascribed is exactly for all this discussion. I would never have said these were, I would have said these are the words she uttered. I'm saying, were you aware of the words that were ascribed to her by the newspaper? Exactly to cover all this discussion about whether... No.
Put more accurately by saying, are you aware that these words were ascribed to her? There's a difference between the two.
But were also denied by her must be the addition. We must put the things in completion.
No, I will never do that.
I think at the interest of fairness, this is quite an important part of the case. And reporting of what's happening here today will also take place.
Yes.
So let's put it accurately. Were you aware of two facts? One, that those words were ascribed to her. That's the first fact. And are you aware of the fact that she denies using language of that kind?
Chairperson, neither. Again, I saw this article when it was brought in as evidence for me to go over. I have heard of criticism, as I say, but I wasn't aware of words as such ascribed to the National Commissioner saying that. The criticism that I'm referring to is not to do with "we are not sorry." No.
Yeah, okay. Maybe let me put it this way so that we're all clear. Were you aware that those words were ascribed to her last year and that she only denied them this year in March or April?
No, I wasn't aware.
Okay, thanks. But you were aware of Brigadier Kalitz's words that the police had done nothing wrong, much earlier than what we're discussing about the National Commissioner.
I think he actually used the expression 110%.
Yes.
Plan had everything gone to plan 110%. Did you know he'd said that?
No, Chairperson. I watched the video here for the first time in the Commission.
Thank you. You wouldn't say that everything went to plan 110%.
No, obviously I'm of the opinion otherwise, but that I think is, if that video, if I'm not mistaken, is 2 days after, on the 17th or 18th.
I think it was the 18th, wasn't it?
The 18th, yes. So the amount that he could have known by the 18th, I think, is also very limited, and whether we're saying that to try to just make the members work on their morale to get them to go out again to another huge march or gathering with Mr. Malema. I don't know, but he would need to obviously testify to that. But I don't think accurately he could have known the full extent of what had gone on within that short period of time.
I take it, to put it gently, that the plan didn't envisage that 34 people would be killed.
No.
And to that extent, it would be less than 10% successful, correct? In your estimation?
I don't understand how you can ask me to place a percentage on the success rate of a plan.
Well, Brigadier Kellis placed a percentage and you've now agreed that it was not correct. So you must have...
He says he can't, he doesn't agree with it, but he says let Brigadier Collins explain why he said it. He can't do so.
You don't...
you leave it. I think you've got enough ammunition for cross-examination.
I have more than enough. Yeah.
Without pushing this witness further on in respect of matters that he can't really answer.
No, I'm not, Chairperson. I'm simply following up on your question. But that's fine. Then there's the issue of Mr. Noki, and I'm not going to go for long on this because Mr. Chaskalson dealt with it. But it's my understanding of your evidence that from what you were told, the so-called contract between Mr. Noki and Mr. McIntosh, there was only one such contract, quote unquote. Correct?
There was only one contact between Mr. Noki and Mr. McIntosh.
Yes, sorry, I'm sorry, it's vague. There is a suggestion in the documents that there was some contract of death, to put it mildly. Contract, yeah.
To put it accurately, the Exhibit L suggests that Mr. Norkie suggested that the police and he signed a contract that they'd have a battle or something. A different version of that alleged contract appears in one of the earlier Roots documents.
That's correct.
Which is on paper, but it suggests that the strikers, or perhaps the militant group, it's not clear, had signed a contract among themselves that they would stand and fight and die if necessary. But the suggestion that there should be a sort of bizarre suggestion that there should be a contract signed between a representative of the police on the one hand and the representative of the strikers on the other, that they should have a fight. I mean, that is in Exhibit L, but that's contradicted, if that's the right word, by the earlier version of the narrative. So I'm not quite sure what exactly you're putting to the witness in this regard.
Well, thank you, Chairperson. Your summary is 110% correct.
And I never go above 100%.
But that's exactly the point. I'm just closing the loop here, Chairperson. All I'm doing is to make sure that there's not two contracts, that there's one contract, and really that's all. And that
can help us on that.
Well, you can tell us what he was told, which he put in the exhibit.
It may well be you'll find that part of the exhibit was Colonel Fisser's work, but let's close that door first. The section of the exhibit which talks about this rather bizarre contract
L192
is the second bullet of slide 192. The words are that Noki is alleged to have said to Lieutenant Colonel McIntosh at 1340, quote, "We must sign a paper so the world can see how we kill one another today," unquote. Are you the author of that slide, or was that Colonel Fisser's work?
Colonel Fisser's work, Chairperson. I sourced the photograph.
The information upon which the slide is, that bullet of the slide is based, were you present when that was furnished to Colonel Fisser?
No. And I think we covered some of this previously in the cross-examination, that the previous version seemed to have come verbatim from Brigadier Carlitz, although Colonel McIntosh was the main negotiator. But we are also aware that Colonel McIntosh was, after the operation, returned to his unit, whereas Carlitz stayed on. And when they got to Roots, they obviously got back together.
There's also some evidence that Lieutenant Colonel McIntosh can speak Kronagalo, and the evidence is that Brigadier Carlitz couldn't speak any of the vernacular languages, which is why he wasn't at the scene on the 13th. But again, I don't know what light that throws on matters. If Mr. Semenya wants to throw some light on it, let's give him a chance.
Chair, you'd recall we just don't have the document as an exhibit as yet. But there is a document of the translation of that conversation, which has been given to all of us by Cliff Decker, Hofmeyr attorneys, where they conceal the identity of the individual for his safety. the actual words on that translation appear on that document. If it should be an exhibit now with which Mr. Mpofu wants to tackle this subject, we make this available. All of the parties have it, actually.
It's not such.
The parties are obviously ahead of us on that one, but not only on that issue. But Mr. Mpofu, you've seen the document to which Mr. Semenya referred.
No, I haven't, Chairperson, but it's not such a big point. I can have a look at it now. And
well, you and I are colleagues in ignorance on that point.
For the first time, Chairperson.
Hope for the last. I want to take a look at it. Should we take Patia German now? I did understand you to say, Mr. Mpofu, during the lunch German, that you thought you might go as far as tea. Sometimes it may help to sort of for you to gather your thoughts and your notes together. So shall we take Patia German now? Look at the document. You can decide whether it should go in as an exhibit now, and then refreshed by tea, we can then come and address the last part of your cross-examination.
Thank you, Jefferson.
What's up?
Colonel, you're still under oath. Mr. Mpofu, is this the last
Segment.
segment? Yes, I see we've been given some reading matter.
Yes, Chairperson, if that could be made an exhibit.
Which one? The two bits of paper we've got.
Triple J.
We have firstly a document signed by the National Commissioner for a work session on operational response service policies. That goes in exhibit, doesn't it?
Chair, that will be exhibit Triple J 203.
Exhibit what?
Triple J 203.
203. All right. Now, I have to write that in my book. And the other one is a document headed private and confidential. Despite the fact it's private and confidential, it's been given to us.
That's correct, Chair. That's Triple J 202.
All right, well, I better write them in that order. Exhibit Triple J 202 is an affidavit, is it? Is it an affidavit?
No.
Statement. Statement with a fingerprint on the bottom. Statement by do we know who the statement maker is? Statement by London interpreter. Is that right?
Yes.
All right. Statement by London interpreter. It's not even under oath, but it has got his fingerprint on it. And then the other one is exhibit Triple J 203, and that is it looks like a bundle of documents, isn't it?
Chair, it's the call-up instruction.
I see. Call-up.
Have you got that?
Call-up instructions.
And then the other one's got a different date.
Yeah, okay. Call-up instructions for, plural, for work session. Now, I put this in quotation marks. Work session on operational response service policies. Right, so just for the sake of good order, let me repeat that. Exhibit Triple J 202 is a statement by a London interpreter, and Exhibit Triple J 203 is call-up instructions for, quote, work session on operational response service policies. Mr. Semenya, are you handing these documents in? Would you like to say something about them, or do you delegate that difficult task to Mr. Mpofu?
Did to Mr. Mpofu, Chair.
Well, Mr. Semenya, there seem to be different call-up instructions on different dates.
It is an extension of the first call-up.
Thank you.
This call-up instruction is not continued.
No.
Got nothing to do with us now. It's just been marked and identified.
What appears from this document is that it relates to a work session on operational response service policies, as it was called, commencing, it would seem, on the 28th of August 2012 at the Burgers Park Hotel in Pretoria. No, that's wrong. The officers summoned to the work session had to report to the Burgers Park Hotel on Tuesday, the 28th of August 2012 at at 8 p.m. and the work session was due to begin the following day, the 29th of August 2012, and to extend to the 31st of August in the Divisional Commissioner ORS's office, Napa Naga building. Depending on progress made, the office should be prepared to stay longer, and then this is then extended from the next letter relates to an extension from the 3rd of September to the 7th of September, and this time the venue is Potchefstroom, and it appears as if certain other persons have been added. The first one called up 5 people. A 6th person has been added in this letter relating to the continuation from the 3rd of September. It's then extended by another letter, still at Potchefstroom, at the Elgro Hotel, from the 10th of September to the 16th. And now there are 9 people present, so 3 more have been added. And then it goes on the 16th of September to the 20th of September, the Elgro Hotel in Potchefstroom. And now we've only got 7 people. I'm not quite sure who's fallen out. And then there's another letter. It's extended from... No, this looks like a copy of the same letter.
It's a copy of the second one.
It's a copy of the second letter. I don't know why we have another copy of that. That's just to ensure that more paper is used. Anyway, those are the documents we have. I've explained what they are, Mr. Mpofu. You don't have to do so. And the other document is a document made by this is J 202, made by the London interpreter. It begins with the following heading: the identity of the author of the statement is being held at Cliff Decker Hofmeyer Inc., the attorneys of record acting on behalf of London Platinum. This has been done for the purposes of protecting the author's identity in the interest of the author's safety and security. Author's identity will only be released on instruction of London and on condition London is satisfied that reasonable measures have been put in place and have been agreed upon in order to protect the safety and security of the author. Now, in the light of this heading, Mr. Mpofu, what is your attitude to the production of this document by an anonymous person?
Chairperson, a time is going to come, I think, in the future where the issue of the identity will be, or rather the concealment thereof, maybe contested by us. But for the purposes of this witness and this cross-examination, Chairperson, we are happy that the document should be provisionally accepted as an exhibit.
I see. And I see the relevant passages appear to be paragraphs 45
yes, and 46.
Looks like 49. The one's particularly highlighted are 45 and 46.
Yes, thank you, Chairperson.
Okay, so you don't object to this document being handed in, despite the fact it's not under oath and we don't know the identity of the author?
That's correct, Chairperson, without abandoning my rights to do so later.
Before we carry on, this document comes from from London, so from their attorneys Cliff Decker and Hofmeyer. What we've been told by Mr. Mpofu is if this document goes in, though he accepts at the moment that he will not request that the identity of the author be revealed, he reserves the right to do so later. Now, that means that presumably once the document's in, if his application for the identity of the person to be revealed is successful, then the identity of the person will become known. Now, on the basis of that reservation that he's made, are London happy the document go in?
On this basis, Chair, yes.
Right, very well, okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. Now, Colonel,
if we could
sorry, Chair, Ms. Pillay.
A further question. Has the witness read the document?
No, I haven't, Chairperson.
It looks to me as all you've got to read is paragraphs 45 to 48. I could be wrong on that. But if you want more time, have you been given a copy?
No, somebody on...
Well, that's an omission that should be rectified immediately. Have a quick look at 45 to 48. And when you've seen that, tell me whether you want more time to read the whole document.
Chairperson, possibly while Colonel Scott is reading the document, I wonder if I could put on record a position for the evidence leaders, although it's not a fully caucused position, I must confess. It seems to us that we should also take a position in relation to this document, and what I...
Yes, you're quite right. I'm sorry. I omitted to ask you to take a position.
What I would propose is that we engage with Lonman and set up a consultation with this witness to take a statement to put before the Commission. If it's necessary to protect the identity of the witness, we can protect the identity of the witness. That route's already been followed in some cases previously. And I would propose that this document goes in provisionally at this stage on the understanding that a full statement from this witness will be procured by the evidence leaders with the assistance of Lonman, and how the statement stands up how this document stands up relative to the statement is something we'll assess later.
I understand that, but there's a further problem, and that is that we have been very strong in this Commission, and the time has not come to abandon that stance, that witnesses shouldn't be questioned about documents, about sections of documents, which, unless the witness has been given the opportunity to acquaint himself or herself with the full context of the statement. So that's why I see the Colonel, who looks like a fast reader to me, has been read. Have you read the whole statement?
I've read roughly from 44 through to 51, which is the piece of the context.
I doubt. Sorry?
I presume that's the essence that Mr. Mpofu wants to put the questions to.
So if you are content to be questioned on the basis that you've seen that part of the context, I permit it, but I want to make it clear for future reference to all concerned that basically we expect a witness to be given the opportunity to read a document beforehand, the whole document, so that there's no question of passages which are out of context being put. But if you...
I have not asked a single question since tea.
If you would prefer to have a couple of minutes just to read the whole statement, I think it might be wiser. Possibly, if you think you can read in a couple of minutes, then we won't adjourn. You can just sit and read it quietly now while we wait. But we can all read it, so we'll all know the context when the questions proceed.
I want to finish. If I was going to come back on Thursday, then I wouldn't mind.
you read the document? Oh, you saw it. me as if you read the whole document. Mr. Mpofu, can you carry on with your cross-examination? Do your best to finish by 4 if you can.
Well, Chairperson, all contracts are off now. but
I never signed a paper.
yes, but I'll do my best, Chairperson. Colonel, the importance of this is that it would seem you've read paragraph 45 and 46 of the document, correct? Of Exhibit 202.
Yes, I have.
Triple J.
Triple J 202, I'm sorry, yes. Would it be fair then to say that we now have, and this might be important because this might go down as whatever Mr. Noki's last words were. We now have three versions. One, which Mr. Chaskalson asked you about, which suggests that the contract was among the protesters, that they would die there, as summarized by the chairperson earlier. And then there's the version of the interpreter that we have here, which says two people came forward and they said that today there will be a fight. And we don't know who the two people are, but for the purposes of this question, we'll assume that one of them was Mr. Noki. And then there's the third version, which I'm going to argue is a doctored version or an embellished version, which says that Mr. Noki said, we will kill each other today. That's a fair summary of the situation as we have now, correct?
The way I'm summarizing it after reading this document is that line 45, paragraph 45, is early morning. It's on the arrival of the police at the neutral area. Because you can see in 47, they asked why these barbed wires were brought, which I know that Carl had said he answered to. And 44, we stopped at the koppie and asked for 5 men to come forward to speak to us. 2 men came forward and they said that today there will be a fight. So what's being alluded to here is obviously in the morning.
It appears from paragraph 49 on the following page.
Yes, that is so, Chairperson. We had mentioned this is still morning. Now, the other one that we're speaking of is in the afternoon, where the photograph is taken where Mr. Noki sees the razor wire being rolled out, approaches the negotiation nyala and makes the comments to the people inside the nyala. 2 different occasions.
So there are 3 occasions on that.
Well, those 2
because if you look at slide 192, slide 192 refers to 2 meetings between Noki and the police. The earlier one in the slide is in fact the second bullet, 1340. Noki comes to the Nyala and speaks to Lieutenant Colonel McIntosh. And it says we must sign a paper so the world can see how we'll kill one another today. And then the later one about to the effect that he said these hippos would not leave this place and you will all die today. That's 1540. So that's 2, both in the afternoon. And this statement refers to another one in the morning. Now, before you proceed, can I just ask you this? Am I correct in thinking that there's been evidence that Lieutenant Colonel McIntosh can speak Whanagalo?
I don't recall it, Chairperson, but I haven't been following it obviously as closely as you have. So,
yes. Chairperson.
If that's so, then he didn't need an interpreter for what he was told at what he was allegedly told at 1340.
Chairperson,
There's so much time.
I'm reminded that what he said was, or what was said, he hasn't given everything, was that he was conversant with Whanagalo, but he wasn't sufficiently confident to conduct the negotiations in Whanagalo, so they used an interpreter. But it may be, we'll have to find out later, I take it, that he might have understood what was said to him, if what is said here was said. But anyway, that's a matter that we can look at later. Mpofu? Sorry, Colonel, do you want to say something before Mr. Mpofu speaks?
I'm noticing, as I know I have with other people's statements with regard to when General Annandale and I would have discussed issues with regard to the arresting and so on. It's not just me who struggles to remember exact times and possibly even days, but some of these incidents that we are referring to seem to be the same incidents, just at different times of the day, which I can also understand, being there at that time, knowing that it was difficult to, keep a solid memory of everything that was going on. But what I can recall being told was that initially there was something said when the police did arrive with the razor wires. They were approached and asked why, and the explanation was given, but threats were made. I'm not sure if that coincides with the actual speaking to Nyala 6 when it was positioned, and that at 2 other occasions during that day, the last one being when Mr. Noki saw the razor wire being rolled out, when the final threat was made. But I was aware of 3, but I think Brigadier Carlitz and Colonel McIntosh have got those more or less sorted out to what was said and when.
Yes. Thank you, Colonel. Really, what I'm getting at is simply this following proposition, that from the versions that we have, it's possible, I won't put it higher than that, it's possible that these words that are contained in your Exhibit L and ascribed to Mr. Noki about killing each other were not made, well, at least as far as the interpreter is concerned. Possible. Agreed?
Witness, I take it, can't comment on it. I mean, he wasn't there. So the most he can say it's possible, maybe, maybe not. Am I right? From your own knowledge, you don't know.
All I can say, becoming wise to these type of questions, is I can't answer that.
Well, yeah. But the thrust of my question is that this is something that has been ascribed to somebody, and even there's a book that has been published whose title is "We Are Going to Kill Each Other Today." And I'm saying that if it was your loved one, you would be interested to know if he merely said there's going to be a fight today, or he said we agree that we're going to die today, or he said what is being now bandied about in the literature of this country. Would you agree?
I fully agree with you. But as I say, it's something that, and I've always maintained, what was said and what was done is what was said and what was done. And if what I know is what I can contribute, and I will quite openly contribute, but obviously I don't know this, and the slides we are actually talking to here was information not dealt with by me. It was brought into the presentation through Colonel Visser.
Yes. Anyway, and of course, you know that our version, or that the version of Mr. Magidwana, of Mr. Noki's last words were, "Let us walk to Nkaneng, let us not run, we have done nothing wrong." And that is what the chairperson called not directly disputed evidence. You are aware of that? Yeah. Okay. Now, are you also aware, did you play any role in the rollout of Phase 6, which happened in September?
I know it's not directly disputed as you've mentioned, but I have to also just mention, playing open cards for the Commission, that the statements of Mr. Zuma and the other two don't mention anywhere that Mr. Noki told them that. On the contrary, when Mr. Matunja speaks to them and says to them, you should leave here today because he believes that they are going to come to some harm for whatever reason he believes that, they actually take the decision to tell him that they are not leaving here today and that he should leave so that somebody can tell the story, but that they are not going anywhere.
I think you can leave that to Mr. Smenya. So, but were you...
It's an indirect disputation of what he said.
Yes. The question is, did you play any role in the rollout of Phase 6 of your plan?
Initially, I helped with the getting the documents in line for the provincial commissioner to have some form of documentation to which she would agree to a cordon and search operation happening, Section 13.7. That was on the morning of, I think I started already assisting with the brigadiers on the Wednesday afternoon. Mr. Dirk Boertes, I think, got plans of some of the hostels, and they were looking at how many people were where, what the hostels looked like, doing a general appreciation of the hostels. But by the Thursday morning, I assisted putting some small type of presentation just together. It wasn't meant to be a presentation, it was just to be printed thereafter, to be attached to the application for the cordon and search operation. But when it actually did take place later in September, I assisted with a Google map of sort, which I emailed through, but I'm not sure that it was used in any way.
Yes. And the thrust of my question will really be that by the time you implemented phase 6, it was after routes, correct?
Yes, it was.
And to the extent that in that operation, somebody in the implementation of phase 6 of your plan, Councillor Masutlo was killed, would it be fair to say that the lessons learned, or rather no lessons had been learned?
I don't think it's for the witness to be asked that question.
Well, I was asking the witness.
It may be the point you can argue at the end. Maybe we would agree with you, but with great respect, I don't to the witness. I don't think his answer is going to take it any further.
Okay, but you are aware that somebody died during the course of the rollout of phase 6?
I wasn't, no.
You were not aware?
No.
Okay. Right. Did Colonel Miraf, is it Colonel? Yeah. Did Colonel Miraf, when he told you about the events of the 13th, in which event you say he was very emotional, did he also tell you that he blamed General Mpembe for that event?
No, as I say, he gave feedback to the National Commissioner, but it was mostly restricted to just the fact he was having to carry away, I think it was Lieutenant Baloy. I think that he carried him and took him to hospital. But no, he didn't mention...
Yes. And before, I'm just going to do a video which is going to be my last, it's very short, it's going to be my last question for you, which I hope we'll be able to get to. But before, or rather, let me ask for it to be set up and then I'll ask you the question in between. It's M43? MTS 43 of the videos of the 14th of August 2012.
Have we seen this already? An exhibit?
No, Chairperson. This is, if I can just appraise the...
No, sorry, if it's not an exhibit already, do we have to give an exhibit number now?
Yes.
All right, Ms. Pillay will tell us what it will be.
It's J204.
How do I describe it?
Okay, don't play it, please. Yes, I think it's ready now.
How do I describe it? Ask Ms. Pillay.
Chairperson, you can describe it as
video clip.
Video clip.
Has it got a number?
I want to. Let me explain what it is. Then the chairperson can phrase it himself. I referred to L90. 90.
Video clip in
L90 of full video clip, video clip of L90.
Full video clip relating to
exhibit
slide 90 of exhibit.
That's correct.
L.
Yeah. And this is the video clip which I want to contrast with the one that was offered to the Commission. Just to highlight the portion, yes.
Sure.
But before we play the video clip, I just wanted to ask just one question. To your knowledge, the people of the TRT, are they trained marksmen?
Sorry, you get what we call in the police a course for a dedicated marksman, and it rises to two higher levels, the highest level being at the special task force level. But they are trained in the use of an assault rifle. Yes.
Yes.
The TRT people are trained in the use of assault rifles,
Yes.
but not to the standard of, quote, dedicated marksmen, unquote.
That's correct.
But, yes, fair enough. But at distances of about 10, 20 meters, if they had wanted to do so, they could have shot the people on their legs, for example, correct?
Well, on a shooting range, very possible. Understanding that in reality, and this is what we try to educate people on, even in a special task force environment, you don't, in reality, come up against a cardboard target. You're coming up against somebody that's moving, that's posing a threat to you, that's possibly firing at you. It's a different scenario to that just shooting at a static target that's placing no pressure upon you as a human being. So it depends what the scenario is that you find yourself in. 20 meters can become a very pressurized environment, for that matter, to shoot accurately.
See, the problem, Kenyon, is that you answer something I have not asked you. I've simply asked you whether in those distances, these people, should they have wished to do so, are able to aim for the lower limbs, for the legs, for example.
But that's what I'm saying. On a static target, that's easy. When somebody's walking, running, crouched down, to expect then to shoot at lower limbs when you've got a body position that is in fact hiding your legs to some degree. I'm just putting it back into that context. It could be difficult for them to take that shot at. If you're asking if they're standing on a shooting range and they could quite accurately, even for that matter under time pressure, shoot at something which resembles legs, yes, it's very possible.
Okay, at the very least, do they know that once a call for ceasefire has been made, which is associated with the end of any perceived threat, that they should stop shooting at people who might, in case other people die after, when there's no longer any need for them to die?
Again, you must ask the question. You've got somebody that's perceiving a threat. So the person who's calling for the ceasefire may be calling for that for a reason. And I allude to the person who's standing at the front of the vehicle, who's putting his arm up shouting ceasefire. And whether he is one of two scenarios here. One, he's perceived the threat is over. Two, which I know he had a stoppage on his weapon stopped firing, and he needed to move backwards, and he couldn't with the person to his left firing his R5 rifle like he was. Thus he was shouting ceasefire for that purpose. So again, when people are shouting ceasefire, you take notice of that, but you're in any case not firing indiscriminately. You're supposed to be firing at a threat. So if somebody's shouting ceasefire and you're still perceiving a threat, you will still need to deal with the threat that you're perceiving in essence.
Yes, but okay, so at the minimum, we have to accept that from the point of view of the person who's shouting ceasefire, the threat has dissipated.
From the point of view of the person saying that, like I said, one of two scenarios. Either he has a problem and he needs somebody to stop shooting so he can move into that person's line of fire, or he has accepted that the threat has dissipated and he's calling for a ceasefire because of that reason.
And you are aware from the videos that there was more than one person shouting ceasefire?
I am aware, yes.
Thanks. And that those shouts were repeated many times?
It is common practice. When someone starts shouting ceasefire, you will do a snap appreciation of the situation and relay the order.
Yes. Now, we can play the video. Thanks. Please stop. Chairperson, I'm just worried. What's important about this video is actually the audio right towards the end, and I'm not happy with the level of the audio at this stage. But maybe let's yeah. Can you maybe just increase the volume and fast forward? You think it's not long?
No.
Okay.
Better go back to the beginning. We didn't.
No, please don't go back to the beginning. The portion we want is right at the end.
I said, how long is our clip?
It's a few seconds.
Well, we might as well go back to the beginning, then we get the thing in context and we hear everything clearly from the beginning. Let's do that.
Okay, sorry, I think I was speaking over the video. Can you just reverse it for something like 10 seconds? 3. Okay, Chairperson, that's not exactly where I wanted it, but it's close. The point about this video is that the version that was given to the Commission stops around about here. But I'm now going to play just the last few seconds which were omitted, which there's somebody in Afrikaans says "Eletni," and I couldn't hear it properly. And then immediately after that is the part that I quoted to you, which says they don't show any aggression towards us. But yes, please continue. Yes. Did you hear that part, Kennel? The English part.
You know, no.
They're showing no aggression towards us.
That you've, for the first time, yes, I have, and
Thank
only
you.
because you've highlighted it. I didn't hear that the first time I played this video.
Yeah, no, that's fine. But you would agree that that's practically it's less than 6 seconds.
Perhaps we should record that the sound is very poor quality. And if one listens very carefully, I heard what I thought was sounded like they're not showing. I didn't hear the rest of it. But I can quite understand someone who's looking at video clips to see what to include in the presentation might have had difficulty in making out what was being said and might therefore have considered it wasn't necessary to include in the presentation. But I know that's not what you want, but that's the way it seems to me.
Well, I can assure you that although the chairperson might understand it, but maybe you need to make me understand why it would be necessary to cut off 5 seconds of something which contain such an important utterance that they are they are showing no aggression towards us.
I ask him this: did you hear that important utterance when you looked at that video for the purpose of deciding whether to include it, and if so, how much of it in the presentation?
Firstly, no, Chairperson, and secondly, I think the majority of that video is not actually part of the presentation. It's more just the part where the man walks away, goes to urinate, and then it stops again. I know this is why we actually cut these videos, because of the very poor video footage, being blurred, being shaken. We tried to get to parts that we could actually show.
Yes, but this version that ends 5 seconds later was available on your, what do you call it, hard drive, correct?
Yes, it was.
And despite it being available, those 5 seconds, the one that was presented to the Commission was 5 seconds shorter, correct?
No, it was significantly shorter. There are a lot from the beginning of that is not displayed either, as well as the part you're talking about at the end. But again, as the chairperson has correctly put out, that's the first time I actually hear that being said. And if you'd have played it and asked me to listen for something, I probably wouldn't have picked it up either.
Let me put it this way. Would you agree that the effort of cutting out 5 seconds from a video is, if it was just a neutral occurrence, is not worth even saving to the extent that you would waste your time in editing a video by taking out a crucial 5 seconds out of it. You get what I'm saying?
Chair, once we know, and unless we are told differently, that editorial was done by the witness, maybe the answer would be useful. But can the record also indicate this is on Tuesday, not on Thursday?
Well, you heard what Mrs. Semenya said it was on Tuesday. Were you the editor of the video clips? Did you decide what segment of that video would be included in the presentation?
At the end of the day, yes. There was a couple of us looking, but I was the one who would have cut and put it together and put it in.
Now, Mr. Mpofu described it as a crucial 5 seconds. Did you see it as a crucial 5 seconds?
No, I was not aware that was said, for that matter, where it's been said.
I must also say that I didn't hear that.
Well, the witness
you have
did.
to be very attentive and repeat it if you want to hear. I didn't hear that.
Yes. No, thank you. I'm happy if the witness said he heard those words. So I'm happy with
Only
that.
today.
Only today, and they are interrupted. If I'm correct, he says something, somebody else speaks, and then the last word is muffled or comes through somewhere there. But as I say, with you giving me the words before the time, I can try to place them as they're being spoken. But without you having given the words, I would have probably over-listened that again without hearing it.
Yes, and for the record, I can tell you that it's clearer on the computer than it is in this kind of auditorium. But I want, it's fine. As long as you heard it, you heard it. Right, okay. Now, finally, I want to put it to you, or rather, no, it's fine. I'll put it to you that we're going to argue that both the planning and the implementation of your plan were, to say the least, shambolic, and that resulted in the deaths of those people and the injuries of the others. Any comment?
I'm not sure how I'm supposed to respond.
Okay, well then don't.
Given you an opportunity to respond, if you feel that it's not necessary, then you don't have to.
Yeah, well, if you think it was not shambolic planning, you can say it was not.
Like I say, that's not a short answer, Chairperson. That's a huge amount of evidence that we've already passed through, been through. For me to go back to recite why I don't believe, etc. is...
Unless Mr. Mpofu's got some rabbits up his sleeve that we don't know about, I suspect that the argument he will present will be based upon Mr. White's report, who does criticise the planning in quite strong terms. And in as much as you've had the opportunity of dealing with Mr. White's criticism when Mr. Rube was cross-examining you, are you content to stand with what you said in answer to her, or is there something more you want to say?
Chairperson, I think we'll probably cover more of that in re-examination. As I said, I was limited in the time I had to actually go through everything Mr. Leroux gave me to go through.
Okay.
So, and again, it can open up days of debate in that respect as well. But pretty much what I've said to her still stands. Well, not pretty much. Everything I've said to her in relation to Mr. White's statement still stands as such.
You intend, if the opportunity is given to you in re-examination, possibly to enlarge on some of your comments?
Yes, Chairperson.
Thank you. For now, I'll take that as a no. And I'm also putting it to you that there's no evidence which was contained either in your presentation or presented to you that suggested that there was an attack on the police, apart from what you inferred from the crouch walking, which we know was a sign of submissiveness, or at least which you said you can't comment on, but the evidence will be that it's a sign of submissiveness.
Is there a question in there?
Yes, I'm saying I'm putting it to you. Sorry, what you do is you comment. You can disagree, agree, or say nothing. Up to you.
Well, I don't know now. We are told that crouching it's a sign of respect. Now we are told it's submissiveness.
Yeah.
Which one of the two?
Oh, well, yeah. That's the point you can be arguing.
Whichever one you choose. Respect. It's fine. I'll leave you with
know that. Well, he may know it, but the witness doesn't, as I understand. It may be a controversial matter at the end of the day, but let's not spend time on it. What's being put to you is your inference that they were coming forward to attack the police is based solely upon the manner in which they walked. That's what counsel puts to you. Do you agree with that?
I disagree, Chairperson. It's based on numerous facts. It's based on a history which is built over days. It's based on what I know in hindsight now. Having dealt with the presentation, having seen the transcripts of the videos of the strikers speaking, knowing the threats, it's based on, as I mentioned earlier, that the strikers had no intention of leaving that area, according to Mr. Matunjwa, as well as their own statements. A decision is somehow then taken to mobilize or to move. And again, seeing the razor wire coming, Mr. Noki still approaches the negotiation Nyala to voice his threat again at that stage to them, moves away, takes the group, and then mobilizes the group. They move towards the kraal. They go right through the public order policing's non-lethal, moving through it, which is a definite sign of the police saying, move away, disperse away, move in the opposite direction. They choose to move in the same direction. They're going towards the police. They fire upon the police. In saying that, on approaching the police, they shoot at the public order policing members with sharp-point ammunition and then walk into the TRT line. And in respect of all that put together, my opinion again is still that is not a dispersion effort on behalf of that militant group.
That's your inference. Whether that inference can be drawn is something for us to decide at the end of the day. And there may be countervailing factors, particularly what one can see on the video, the way they walked and so on. But these are matters I don't think we need debate at this stage of the afternoon.
No.
Anything further you want to put to him?
Yes. I also want to put to you that Exhibit L, which you co-authored, was in very major respects doctored and riddled with inaccuracies intended to give the wrong impressions to the Commission.
Very wired statement. The various inaccuracies have been put to the witness. Are you, as it were, incorporating those inaccuracies in the question? And so all those inaccuracies that have been pointed out, you say were done for the purpose.
Yes, actually I'm only confining it to those that have been put to him.
All right, okay.
Again, Chairperson, with regard to Exhibit L, there was no ill intent, at least on the part of myself, and I would also stand proxy for Colonel Visser, working with him a long time on that. What we knew is what we were given. We didn't have access, as I've stated, to other parties' inputs, or to, for that matter, some of the video footage and expertise that other parties had. Considering that it's taken some others many months, probably up to 8 months, to have analyzed some of that footage to come up with their findings, we initially had 2 months. And others have worked off the foundation we laid. We had nothing when we started, and we had to start from scratch. We were doing the best job that we could do, and again, being truthful and objective with what we could find. We were limited in the amount that we could present. It was never meant to be a full presentation. It was meant to be something to, as best possible, enlighten the Commission to what the police at least had experienced to some degree. And then from there on, obviously it was going to be open for scrutiny. I didn't even personally think that it was going to be evidence. I thought it was just a presentation for that matter.
It isn't evidence, it's just a presentation.
Yes. So that is where we came from. And I know there's been many points raised in it, and where they are justified, it is so. And I will stand as well with the points that have been raised in objection if I can see the point is true. If things need to be changed, then it is so. But it doesn't mean that what we were doing at that time was malicious. It was only what we knew and what we were told, and the deductions we could have made through the video footages and inputs that we had at that time.
Well, I put it to you that, as exemplified by this latest example of the video that I played to you, that the videos were also deliberately manipulated to exclude crucial portions from the Commission.
Well, if you're saying this in relation to the last video you've just shown, then...
As an example.
As an example, then again, I dispute that. That's not something that I even picked up then and struggled even to hear now. So, like I say, it's one thing to sit afterwards and to take everything that the police has provided and to go into depth and have experts analyze it, when at the time the police doesn't have the luxury of that time or the expertise or the accessibility to some of the devices that experts have got to go through the same procedure. So, as laymen and in the presentation we presented, that's what we presented, and that slide was only meant to depict the rituals, which are objective evidence of the rituals happening.
Yes, and finally then I put it to you that if the answers you've given to the last two propositions were correct, and given the fact that you also had the 8 months that you ascribed to others, that you would have, at the beginning of your evidence, presented to the Commission those areas which after 8 months you have found to be inaccurate, and not have waited for them to be extracted out of you in cross-examination?
Well, the areas that have been shown I was not even aware of. Some of them that have been shown to be malicious I still feel were totally done by coincidence. Showing the Mr. Matunja's video at the end of the protesters, for instance, I wasn't even aware that that was an issue, or that it had been placed there for that matter. So I disagree with that. It's not that we presented a presentation and then said, okay, let us spend the next 8 months going through this to scrutinize our own work. What had been delivered to the Commission had been delivered, and it was left at that because it became an exhibit, Exhibit L. So for us to have continued, I just didn't continue with that, and had no reason to, for that matter, because it was as though we'd reached the end of what we had laid down in a presentation and could not go ahead and change it for that matter.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. I have nothing further. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mpofu. Yes, Mr.
May I just deal with one housekeeping matter? There's some lack of clarity as to what's to happen on Thursday. Could I just ask that the key people involved, that the SAP's legal team and Mr. Mpofu and the evidence leaders meet the commissioners straight away for a decision to be made on that?
I take it there's no one else to cross-examine, so Mr. Semenya will re-examine on Thursday. 9:30 or 9? We will recommence at 9 o'clock, but the meeting to which Mr. Badlinde has issued an invitation will take place now. But we will adjourn. We're not sitting tomorrow for the reasons I explained at the beginning of the session this morning, and we will resume on Thursday morning at 9 o'clock.
Sorry, Chair. May we be apprised of the outcome of the meeting if it changes what's going to be taking place on Thursday?
I think that's a perfectly reasonable request, is it not?
Definitely not.
Of course. If anything material happens at the meeting, I'm sure Ms. Pillay, in her usual efficient fashion, will send out an email to all affected parties. We will now adjourn until Thursday morning, 9 o'clock.
Okay, go back.